super excited for the launch of Donna's latest novel. And without further ado, I'm going to welcome our guest who you're all here for. Donna Dechen Birdwell is an anthropologist whose latest novel, Not Knowing, takes place in two locales she knows and loves, Belize and Texas. Stepping away from the dystopian future she created in Recall Chronicles, she writes in Not Knowing about two wings of our human quest for knowledge, archaeology and space exploration. Please join me in welcoming Donna.
So excited. I mean, you guys, I look out here and y'all are my people. I love it. And I will tell you the other thing that I'm enjoying is that people who don't know each other are chatting with each other, and it's like, oh, we kind of get along. It's like, well, yeah, we're my friends. All right. So first of all, thank you very much to Malvern Books for hosting this event. My first novel, Way of the Serpent, also available, was published in June of 2015. And on June 14th of that year, I read an excerpt of the novel at an Austin Writers Roulette event here at Malvern Books. So I feel happily at home here at Malvern. Thank you to Teresa Roberson, who hosts Austin Writers Roulette. When I published Way of the Serpent, I didn't yet know that it was the first of a trilogy that came to be known as the Recall Chronicles. Actually, there may be a fourth book in that series. It's plotted, and the first couple of chapters are written, and it's called Final Recall. You can ask me about that later. What I did know about Way of the Serpent was that it felt absolutely amazing to know I could actually write a book of fiction and get it into print, and I knew I wanted to do more of that. The second book I started to write is the one I'm celebrating today, Not Knowing. In fact, in July of 2015, I spent a couple of weeks in Belize on my own personal writer's retreat, working on the manuscript at a resort called Banana Bank Lodge, which made it into the novel, was a place called Ococcal. The first half of Not Knowing takes place in Belize, not too far from where I began doing anthropological field work back in the mid-1970s, something that my friend Ron Wetherington is familiar with because he was one of my professors at SMU. The area in Belize where I did my anthropological field work is an area I've gone back to many, many times. What I'd like to do this evening is simply introduce you to my characters and then let you in on the reason why July 20th seemed like the perfect date for launching this book. We will start at the beginning, literally part one, the epigraph, because I'm a big believer in epigraphs. Things are not what they seem, nor are they otherwise, which is a quote from the Lankavatara Sutra. Chapter 1. The saggy tissue tore as my trembling hands tried to spread it on the desk in front of me. My eyes squeezed shut against the unwanted memory, and my mother's voice echoed in my head. Put that in the little drawer in the back of your mind, Maggie, and shut it up tight. Sometimes I think my little drawer is getting too full. It was just a dream. Okay, a nightmare. A rerun at that. There was something about it this time. Something different that made me want to spread it out and study it rather than just shove it back inside the drawer. Maybe the dream came because of the arrowhead I'd run across when I was packing, because I remembered who made it. I didn't need this, not now, not when I had to lead a crew of students off into the Belizean jungle to dig for artifacts in less than a week. I needed coffee. Seth would be back from the bakery soon, and I didn't want him to worry. I didn't want to be that kind of wife. I pried myself up from the desk and started down the hallway, just one foot in front of the other, reaching the kitchen as Seth opened the back door. I brought croissants, he said, holding out the grease-stained brown bag like an offering. It bore the logo of our favorite bakery. A chocolate one for you. He set the bag on the table and came over to give me a hug. I stood there with my head on his shoulder, trying to feel okay, trying not to feel what I was feeling. We weren't going to talk about my nightmare. I'd stopped entering it in my dream journal. It was always the same. Except this time it wasn't. Not quite. Are you okay to go to work? Seth asked. I could stay home if you need me. Should you take a pill? I'm fine. Just need to drink some coffee and eat something. The coffee might melt the lump that was clogging my throat. We sat down across from one another at the breakfast table just like on a normal morning. Except today we had croissants. And today, the hands that held my cup were shaking. I set the cup down. You remember I'm leaving for Belize again as soon as finals are over? I said this as much for myself as for Seth. Have you decided when you're coming down? He brushed some crumbs from the table into his hand and dropped them onto his plate. That's still up in the air. I have a grad student with an issue, and then I have that meeting with my agent. I should have everything taken care of within a week. Then I'll come down and suffer through the heat and mosquitoes with you and your crew of weirdos. You know I'm looking forward to it. Seth had visited my field site last year for a few days, but this year he planned to stay with us for the whole summer. He glanced at his cell phone. I shoved the last bite of croissant into my mouth. I'll be ready to go in 5 minutes. Okay, 10. I splashed cold water on my puffy eyes and stared into the mirror. Call it vanity, but from childhood I'd learned to hate what crying did to my face. Crying made me ugly. And knowing this helped me to keep my emotions in check. I searched for the concealer in my makeup drawer. I'd rather stay home, but I knew this would pass more quickly if I kept going, kept doing the things I always do. I ran a comb through my straight blonde hair. Good enough. I pushed aside the twinge of resentment about having to order my life by someone else's schedule. Seth and I had been trying to manage with one car ever since we married 8 months ago. So whoever had the earlier obligations called the shots and the other one got extra office time. Today it was Seth with the early final, and today was not a day I wanted to be stuck in my office an extra 2 hours. Even though I had plenty of papers to grade. I could go by Indra's office for a while. Indra would cheer me up. We stopped near the side door of Seth's building and kissed goodbye. I watched him, striding up the walk, an ungainly figure as he juggled his briefcase and a big stack of papers, his corduroy jacket a bit too loose, his thinning hair in need of a trim. I got behind the wheel and began the quest for a faculty parking spot. Seth and I were solid. We'd met as new tenure track hires, arriving at Southeast Texas State University in the fall of 2019, me in the anthropology department and him in the Department of English and Literature. My father had scoffed at the whole tenure thing, convinced it meant I'd found a cushy job where I could never be fired. I ended up in a faculty lot on the opposite side of campus from my office, driving up and down the lines of cars. Why were there never enough faculty parking spots? The term déjà vu came to mind. I finally found a space right next to what I knew was Indra's car. I looked again and saw that she was just getting out. Thanks for saving me a spot, I said. Premonitions, déjà vu, clairvoyance, synchronicities. We have terms for all kinds of strange occurrences, as if naming them explains anything. What are best friends for? Indra said. I was going to come see you anyway. Want to get a coffee? I shouldered my bag for the hike to the coffee shop. As we walked, Indra peppered me with questions about preparations for our trip to the archaeology site in Belize. Her high spirits were reliably infectious. Indra was just finishing her first year at Southeast Texas State, and her own current grant proposal was for next year, so I figured out a way to include her on my duty. Despite my best efforts at dawdling in the coffee shop, I still got to my office almost an hour before my final exam was due to start. I decided to review my summer field crew and give more thought to their assignments. It beat grading papers. Some of my favorite grad students would be on the crew again this year. I'd even added a couple of advanced undergrads this time. One of them was Ashley Prejean, who'd been thrilled to bits over her selection. She'd been valedictorian of a high school class of 25, and her parents lived in a double wide and ran a roadside bar outside a small dry town in deep East Texas. I was still trying to convince Ashley just how brilliant she was. The other undergrad on the list was Recall O'Connor. That was the only crew member that made me wince. He hadn't been doing well in my class. With a couple of stunning exceptions, his papers were unoriginal and disorganized. He had a tendency to wing it on tests, and so his grades were all over the place, producing an average that was, well, average. He could be arrogant and uncooperative and defensive. On the other hand, his parents were two of the leading lights in Mayan archaeology, and he was named after the last great Mayan king of Palenque. Once he applied for the spot, how could I not include him? It had to be tough trying to follow in the footsteps of icons like Dr. Tim O'Connor and Dr. Martina Rodriguez. I'd first met Recall when he was just a kid, hanging out at his mother's dig in Campeche. During the second season, I worked with her during graduate school. Recall couldn't have been more than 10. My nightmare had reminded me of that summer. So I'm going to skip ahead and read you just a little piece out of chapter 2 on the flight to Belize. I found my seat and stashed my backpack in the overhead bin. Indra was already settling into her seat in the back row, and I waved to her. She'd been a late addition, and the back of the plane had been all that was left by the time I purchased her ticket. We made eye contact, and I gave her a raised eyebrow. Is everything okay? And she responded with a thumbs up. The flight from Bush Intercontinental in Houston to Philip Goldson International in Belize City, across the Gulf of Mexico, over the Yucatan Peninsula, short flight, 2.5 hours. All of the crew were now on board except for Recall, who had flown to Mexico a few days earlier to pay a visit to his mother, who was working in Quintana Roo. My 4 students were clustered together just behind the wing of the plane, and Indra's student was across the aisle from her, in the back. My own seat was several rows forward, a window seat. I had earphones, the noise-canceling kind, and I tuned into some old-school Stevie Ray Vaughan as I watched the coastline of Texas and Galveston Island merge into the Gulf of Mexico. Then it all disappeared beneath a wispy veil of clouds. I was sorry Indra was so many rows away. She reminded me in certain ways of my childhood friend Dori. I hadn't heard from Dori in years, and I knew it was my fault. Dori and I grew up together, spending endless hours playing and talking. A lot of those hours were at her grandmother's house, surrounded by Abuela Maria's colorful parrots, endless shelves of books, and the scent of supermarket candles petitioning the aid of every santo in the Mexican pantheon. Sometimes Abuela told our fortunes. Dame la mano, hija, she said, and with a giggle I put out my hand to her, palm upward. Abuela grasped my hand in hers, peering at the lines and contours through her smudged reading glasses. Her own hands were warm and calloused. Ah, an artist, she said, as she spread my hand flat and traced the length of my young fingers with her rough ones. Who, me? I don't think so, Abuela. I can't even draw a straight line. I must have been about 8 years old when this happened. She reached for my other hand and said something in Spanish that I didn't understand. Dori translated. She wants to know if you're right-handed or left-handed. Derecho, I said. Abuela looked from one hand to the other. She adjusted her glasses and pulled my hands in closer. Her face twitched somewhere between a smile and a scowl. She let go my right hand and began tracing the lines of my left with a steady finger. A long life. Very smart. Very kind. Already one scaring thing happened to you. But very lucky girl. She traced one line after another and then stopped at the base of my palm, below the baby finger. Travel line. Alcanza el monte de luna. Así es que tal vez tú viajarás a la luna. Maybe you go to the moon. Abuela Maria grasped both of my hands between her own and brought them toward her heart. Her dark eyes glittered with affection behind drooping lids and smudged glasses. It was all lighthearted fun for me and Dori. I had no idea what scaring things she referred to, but I think that was when Dori and I began sharing the patently unoriginal love you to the moon and back every time we parted. I looked down at my grown-up hand, wondering if the lines were still the same. So now, one more little bit I'm going to read to you. This is actually way back in the book, but no spoilers, I promise. Meg and Seth had gone to her hometown of Charco Seco in West Texas for Thanksgiving. While I was being barraged with the latest family Q&A, I overheard Elmo, that's her father, telling Seth the story of how he watched the moon landing during his one and only non-military trip outside the U.S. I'd almost forgotten about that, about how he'd done a study abroad in Austria in the summer of 1969 after his third and final year at university, and how he and his fellow students had stayed up all night watching coverage on a tiny black and white TV in the basement of their student hostel. As he spoke now, I recalled more details of the story. I'd heard it more than once. Of course, he included the part about how even though the commentary was in German, they all knew what was happening. They stepped out onto the moon's surface on July 20th at precisely 16:56 local time. Elmo always remembered the exact time. He looked through the kitchen door at me and smiled, his green eyes sparkling. A barrier went up inside me. Such moments were always followed, soon enough, by hurtful words. But I noticed how gray he was getting to be. And I recall being told that it was only a few months after this European journey that his number had come up in the infamous draft lottery of December 1st, 1969, and he joined the army to fight in Vietnam. So, hopefully this gives you guys a taste of what kind of story I've put together here and made you want to learn a little bit more about Meg and Seth and Pakal and Indra and, you know, all of these people. And if any of you have any questions, I'd be happy to entertain a couple of questions. Do you have any?
Do you think this is going to be a series like the last one, or do you think this is a standalone?
This is just what this is. And there's a bit in there that I've actually read at one of the Austin Writers Roulette things, where Seth is talking about some issues that he's having with his editors and publishers. And he talks about the ambiguity of stories and there's, yeah, it would just be wrong for there to be a sequel. It has to just be this. So, yes.
I'm not going to give away any spoilers. I've read the book. But I wanted to say, and I wanted to ask a couple of things about it. Your character development. I've read all of this one actually that you've written. And your character development process in this book seems to be really unique. Can you explain why and how you went about getting the characters to go through the changes that they were going through?
I would like to thank Sanjay Teresa O'Mara, who's a therapist, for telling me that my characters really needed to go through more shit.
Pull it off.
She would. Thank you, Sanjay. I really appreciate it. No, it's true. It's true. And yeah, thinking about more deeply about what they've been through and why they're experiencing the things they are. Yeah. So I tried really hard.
You got it.
Thank you. Anything else? Yes.
So, I've read a little bit of the book, and Seth is a writer.
Uh-huh.
And I was so curious about why you chose to tell about Seth's writings instead of making that your own book.
I actually have written a time crypter story of my own that Seth is a science fiction, her husband, Meg's husband Seth, is a science fiction writer who writes time travel stories about these characters called the time crypters. And it's kind of a foil for talking about a lot of things about time and about, yeah. And I actually did sit down and write a story in the mode of Seth Abbott. But I didn't give him credit for it. I did.
So is that maybe a future companion piece? That
You know, it would. I think it would be fun. I've been thinking, and I might enjoy writing a few more of those pieces.
If you don't, somebody will probably grab it. You should go for it.
I like the name Time Crypters. Anything else? Yeah.
How long did this take to write?
Well, as I said, this was the second book I started writing. Between the time I started writing it and now, today, I wrote and published 2 other books, but I kept coming back to this one. And what I say in the acknowledgments is absolutely true. It says, I say every time I thought I knew what the story was about, it managed to show me something more. And like Meg, I had to dig down another level. So I kept doing that with this story. And all my co-conspirators like Sange and these guys, and it's just, there's just so many people who have given me insight and encouragement along the way, and I'm deeply grateful for all of that. Anything else? Well, thank you guys for coming, and thanks again to Malvern Books, to Becky Garcia, to Chandra and Stephanie and Julie, and all the rest, the amazing staff who make Malvern Books a little literary oasis here in Austin.